Hi, everybody. Here's a little tutorial on what I expect to get from you in terms of lesson plans for the first visit. You have to remember that you're writing a lesson plan because of two reasons. First one is to organize your class in light of what your students need to learn. And secondly, you are going to provide details for the people who are observing you. What that means is that what we receive, your cooperating teacher, the peers who are going to visit you, and myself, should guide us regarding your intentions for your lesson. And what we want to say is whether your intentions match your delivery of the lesson. So, a little bit of advice for your first lesson plan. This is what a lesson plan needs for the visits, right? The first and most important thing is a detailed learning outcome that specifies exactly what learners are expected to learn due to your teaching during that lesson. So there we have to be not very ambitious. You only have 40, 45 minutes. So let's think about something that is attainable for those students you are in contact with in your teaching practice group. And let's not think about other things. If you need to learn again how to write a good learning outcome, which is one of the things that you should really master in this first didactics course, I recommend that you use the ABCD formula for writing the outcomes that you can find in chapter 2 in New Directions in English Language Teaching. You have to make sure that the verbs that you use to describe what students should be able to do, that is to say, the expected behavior, are verbs that we can see. Verbs such as they will know new words, they will understand the text, they will comprehend the dialogue. They don't show us what students actually do. So instead of know, think about what you want them to know. You're teaching them 5 to 7 new words. Okay, students will be able to use the 7 new words in order to describe parts of their routine, for example. We have to be able to see whether students can do that or not. Otherwise, we cannot use this learning outcome as evidence of learning. Remember that evidence of learning is always, in our case, obtained through the performance of the students. So if you teach them, say, 7 new words, but only 2 students who study English privately can use those words during the lesson, that means the lesson was not effective. However, if we see that the great majority of the class can do that, then that can use the words, then that is what we can consider an effective lesson. So the last piece of advice goes back to being realistic. Do not attempt to get students to do more than they can actually do. Even if it is not in line with the syllabus, I don't care. What I want to be able to appreciate is whether you connect to the students realistically and help them learn something. I'm giving you an example here of a learning outcome, and as you can see, it's in various colors. The colors refer to the ABCD that we have discussed. So this learning outcome says by the end of the lesson, all students in the class, working in pairs and later on in groups, should be able to correctly classify the new vocabulary in categories to be given by the teacher, so as to be able to describe a picture connected to the topic in the lesson. If you look at everything which is in green, that is the audience. Who are our audience? Our students. But the degree of learning that you want, in this case, is all the students. You just want them to be able to describe a picture using a set of words that you're going to teach them. Now, the behavior, that is what has to be observed. Students should be able to classify the new words in categories that you yourself give them. For example, words that appear in the picture, they can be furniture, clothes, moods, colors, and places, right? And you teach them up to 7 or 10 words. And the first thing they do after you teach them and they practice saying those words, they work in pairs to classify those words into the categories. That is the first learning outcome. Why do you do that? That is an enabling thing. You make them able to do something else with the new words. And you give them this task to classify the words so that they are able to describe the picture connected to the topic of the lesson. As you can see, the condition is how are they going to learn? Well, basically working in pairs and later on in groups. And the degree is the purple, which means all the students, the degree of students, and correctly classify the new words, because that is the degree of correctness that you want in this case. The behavior is the classification and the description of the picture. So once you have this, it's time for you to think about how you're going to sequence your class. And in order to do that, what we are going to resort to are the 6 E's of learner needs. So the 6 moments need not necessarily be present in every lesson, but the ones that you use have to make sense. For example, exploring and engaging should be in your lesson because this is what determines whether students are able to connect what they know or don't know with the new knowledge. So exploring and engaging can be there. Expressing, that is free communication. In the case of what you want to teach things specifically, that is encountering the new language. And that is, for example, when you teach them the words. How do you teach them the words? You build a story with the 7 to 10 words you want to teach. You may use pictures, you may use eliciting, etc. But after they encounter the words, it's not enough for them to just encounter the words. They need to be able to experiment with those words if you want them to express something. So make sure that you include 1 or 2 activities where they have to use the new words in a controlled way. The activities could be, for example, organizing. You have one sentence, and when the word comes for that in that sentence, you mix up all the letters and they have to unjumble the words. Or you can do a fill in the blanks, or you can do whichever kind of activity, like a crossword puzzle, even though crossword puzzles take them a long time. Anything that gets them to practice so that later on they will be able to describe the picture using those words. And for extending, you will do it, for example, for homework, and you will ask them to illustrate those words, find an illustration, and create vocabulary cards, for example, right? So this is how the lesson is going to be organized, and this is where your skill as a teacher is proven. So how do you communicate that to us? Well, through a lesson plan that looks like this, and I have uploaded a copy of this to Schoology. Every lesson plan, because at the end of the year, you will have to submit a portfolio, which means a collection of moments in your teaching where you did particularly well. Every lesson plan should identify yourself, your cooperating teacher, the group, the time when you taught this lesson, the school, and the date. All that has to be there. Then you specify the learning outcomes. And the rest of the plan, what we call the procedural plan, what we were actually doing in the classroom, because the first part is intentional, right? Is the intentions. We call this upper part, up to the learning outcomes, the anticipatory plan. The plan itself has to tell us what the stage of the lesson is. Are you engaging, exploring, encountering, expressing, experimenting, extending? And how long? And theirs is a calculation. It's a rough calculation between 5 and 7 minutes, between 10 and 15 minutes, that you will have to work that out. Then what you describe for the people who are going to observe you is what the teacher does, what you will do. And I wrote there, please describe what you will do during this phase of the lesson. For example, the teacher writes a word on the board and asks students to think of other words they associate with it. While you're doing that, then the students are going to be doing something. So what the students do? There you put, please describe what students will do during this phase of the lesson. For example, students will work in pairs and list 5 words they associate with the word the teacher has written on the board. The last column, the comments column, we leave open for observers to make comments, ask you questions, make recommendations, make indications about the lesson. And you create as many lines as moments there are in your lesson. Now, again, don't be over ambitious. Remember, you have between 40 and 45 minutes. And if your students have difficulty understanding, factor that in. Now, one important condition of all lesson plans for this particular first visit is that you need to implement at least 3 basic instructional techniques. If you can implement more, all the better. And I'm talking about grading your language, correctly using the board, drilling. If you're teaching new language or students encounter new language, you have to drill it so that they can say it. And you have to do those things correctly, following the advice given in chapter 1 of New Directions in Language Teaching. You can do, well, I said eliciting, using the board, using your fingers to segment sentences. We're talking also about giving instructions, setting up activities, all the basic instructional techniques that appear in chapter 1. Because what we're trying to see is whether you have learned those things and you can connect with the students. That's the purpose of the first visit, which is a diagnosis. So I hope you found this short video enlightening. It gives you some ideas, and I look forward to seeing you all in your lessons. Bye-bye.